This is Dr. Jerome Corsi and with thetruthcentral.com. Today is Wednesday. It's October 11th, 2023. Thank you for joining us here on thetruthcentral.com. We're going to talk today devote the entire show to discussing the situation in Israel. It's a very, very critical moment for the world. And what has started here is, I think, of biblical proportions. Chris, my producer, is with us, and we'll be discussing this, and Chris will be asking me questions as well, and we'll be discussing it from interval to interval. I want to start out with a map of the Middle East. So Chris, if you'll show that first map. You can see Israel, and you can see where the Gaza is just this little tiny area. It's a very, very small area on the Mediterranean, right there. Chris is pointing it out. That little part in red, that's Gaza. That's where Hamas is headquartered, but also Hamas has a foothold in the West Bank. Now, what's happened in Israeli politics in the past, I'd say 20 years, and I've been going back and forth to Israel. I've been there more times than I can remember. And I've consulted with the government. In 2006, I wrote Atomic Iran. And I was invited to come over and talk with the Ministry of Defense in Israel, which I did. And I was able to have very, very serious discussions. I've had excellent cordial relations in Israel and have done a lot to support the country. What is the case at the Gaza is, you'll see the Gaza is right against Egypt. And a lot of weaponry has come in from Egypt through tunnels and other ways. Also, Gaza is on the Mediterranean. When Israel was really vigilant, Israel would intercept a lot of ships trying to bring weapons into Gaza. And there was a great deal of arms dealing going on when we were in the Iraq War, and through the Obama administration, the attack on Benghazi. I've written about this extensively. The left in the United States and the left in Israel have basically caused this situation to happen. Why? Because Iran is now being funded again by Obama. John Kerry did the deal with Obama, with Iran, to give them airplanes full of money and a green light to develop nuclear weapons. Biden's just sent another $9 billion to Iran, or released that money to them. Now, if you look at the West Bank and Gaza, you can see that there was a movement in Israel the past few years, but Netanyahu was under indictment, just like the left is doing to Trump right now. The American Jewish community is not supporting Israel the way it did 50 years ago. And this is a problem. Israel is pretty much isolated right now. And when I advised the government in Obama eras, I said, you cannot count any longer on the United States. And I felt horrible to have to say that. But it was a period of time I was there right after Obama was elected. Obama was in Cairo bragging to Muslim audiences that he'd experienced Islam on 3 continents, which he had. He was born, who knows where he was born, but under his stepfather, Lolo Soetoro, he went to school as a child in Indonesia, and he was registered as a Muslim. We've documented that from the school records. Africa, of course, where he says his father was from, and the United States. And and Obama was fully on the side of the Palestinians. Now, the same thing with Biden. I think Biden is demented. I think he has age-deficient problems, and he should not be president. But Biden, the people behind Biden, about 70% of the people in the administration are Obama. They were all with Obama. This is the Obama 2. And there's Biden. About all he can do is eat ice cream and sniff little girls. Okay, well, that's enough of Biden. Let's get rid of him. And we can get rid of the image. I think it's senior abuse what they're doing to Biden, and I think he should be allowed to retire and and live the rest of his life more in peace, although the corruption is enormous. All right, now what's happened in Israel is that the left has thought that they can make peace with Hamas. The idea was if we just let Hamas run the Gaza, and then run the West Bank into the areas which are Hamas dominated or Palestinian dominated, that they would make peace, that they would be cooperative. There's another picture of Israel. It's just this little sliver. And Chris, if we go to the region, I want people to realize how small Israel is. Go show the whole region. Okay, now Israel is that little blue part over there by Syria. That's Israel. Look at the size of Saudi Arabia. Look at how distant Iran is. And Syria is right against the Golan Heights. Syria, I've been in the Golan Heights. You can stand in the Golan Heights and you can look down to Damascus. The road to Damascus is biblical. And as you think about all these states surrounding Israel are Muslim. Iran, Iraq, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Yemen, Oman. These are all Muslim states. And the region is hostile to Israel. They want the Jews gone and have wanted the Jews gone since 1948, when Harry Truman made the decision to allow the partition, the United Nations to vote for the partition of Palestine to create the state of Israel. George Marshall, who was Franklin Roosevelt's #1 commander in the United States, above Eisenhower, World War II, told Harry Truman that if he made the decision to create Israel, that he would never vote. George Marshall said he would never vote for another Democrat. And this is recorded in McCullough's book on Truman. And Truman basically told George Marshall to do whatever he had to do, but he was going to make his own decision. And Harry Truman felt it was a biblical decision to recreate the state of Israel, which God in the Bible says is going to happen. It did happen in 1948. The diaspora had a home again. It goes back to the Romans in 73 or 79 AD, who destroyed the Second Temple and brought the Jewish sacred vessels back to Rome. You can see it on the Ark of Titus. You can see them coming back with a parade with all the articles from the Jewish temple. And I've seen the Temple Mount where they had these huge, enormous blocks which formed the foundation of the Temple Mount. Some are still there in the West Wall. But the Romans pushed those off the cliff. I don't know how they possibly did it. And you can see this pile of rocks down there. The anger was incredible. Well, okay, so Israel's back together. And behind this is Iran. Iran with all this money and now able to. John Kerry has been, when I wrote Atomic Iran, show the picture of Atomic Iran if you would for a minute, Chris. Atomic Iran, I wrote in 2006. I said, this is going to happen. We're going to have a massive war. Syria is already sending missiles into the Golan Heights. You see Lebanon, which is to the north. I'll try to find a map where we can show Lebanon, because Lebanon is also to the north of Israel. And Lebanon, Hezbollah, which is another terrorist organization, is on the border, ready to go into Israel from the north. So Israel is already under attack, I believe, from Syria. Let's see if we can get Lebanon there. Yeah, right there. You can see where Lebanon is, and Israel's right there. The blue, that's a better picture. Although the blue is the Sea of Galilee, I believe, and you can see there where Lebanon is right to the north of Israel. I'd like you to find a better map of Israel. Go to the earlier map, and Israel is surrounded by enemies. Now, I also want to explain one more thing about how the Middle East functions, and that is Iranians are Shiites, Muslims, and all the rest of these countries are Sunni Muslims. Now, why is that important? as Atomic Iran. I wrote that in 2006. It was my first book after Unfit for Command, in which I worked with John O'Neill, the Swift Boat movement, to try to explain John Kerry's lies about Vietnam. Here, I talk about in Atomic Iran, I actually discussed that John Kerry wanted to give Iran nuclear energy to see what they would do with it. Well, I say in the book what they do with it is make a bomb, and they are going to if they don't already have one. Now go back to the map. When the left in Israel tried to prosecute Netanyahu, they not only, Lebanon's right there by Syria, to the north, right there, that the white part, that's Lebanon, where Hezbollah is. I'll explain Hezbollah in a minute. When this whole area really became, Sunnis and Shiites. Iran Shiite. What they believe is the family of the Prophet Muhammad should be the legitimate rulers of Islam. The Sunnis believe that the leadership of Islam should be secular, like a caliphate. You had the Ottoman Empire, which was Turkey in the 1800s. That was the glory day of Islam in the recent times. Remember, Islam once occupied, that's a better picture of Lebanon. You can see Israel is really just this tiny little sliver. I've been in the West Bank. I've been to the Gaza. I've seen the walls that they built. And I've spent a lot of time in Israel. And the Sunnis and the Shiites are at each other's throats. Oh, and it almost seems like a silly issue to non-believers as to why they'd be fighting about for centuries whether the Prophet's family or secular leadership should be in charge of Islam. Well, the Shiites believe that there was one of the family of the Prophet Muhammad who went down the well as a young child and went into hiding, and he'll come out of the well when there's going to be an apocalypse, and in the apocalypse, Shiite Islam will triumph over the Sunnis worldwide. The Shiites will rule. Now, Ahmadinejad, who was president of Iran, when I was reporting for WorldNet Daily, I was at the United Nations the day Ahmadinejad stood in front of the United Nations and talked about the Mahdi, this young boy coming out of the well. This is a deep Shiite belief. Now, the people of Iran would like to get rid of these mullahs. The mullahs are a group of clerics who run Iran, and they're radical, anti-rabid Jew haters. And they resolve death to the United States and death to Israel. They chant this in the streets. Every so often, the people of Iran try to revolt. And when I was in Israel, I was standing with President Perez, who was watching television and watching the protests going on with the students in 2009, trying to get rid of the mullahs. And Simon Perez asked me, did I think that the students would succeed? And I said, unfortunately, no. The mullahs will let this go on for a while, then they'll begin arresting people, killing them, and putting them in prison indiscriminately. And they did, put an end to it. And Obama said nothing to support the students. All right, so we have in here an end of days event going on. The left not only let Hamas rule these areas, what Hamas did was they keep the people in poverty, because that's their poster children, to say, look, Israel is treating us so badly, our streets aren't paved. But meanwhile, the world sends them billions of dollars, and it's stolen. Yasser Arafat had billions of dollars. His wife lived a life of luxury in Paris. And I was in Israel the day he returned to Israel. I actually left Israel that day. And he came back into a big celebration that he was back in. Went back into Israel and set up shop. Yasser Arafat was the head of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And there he is. And they are terrorists. And Israel is funding this. I mean, Iran is funding this. Iran is behind this entire movement. We funded Iran. John Kerry has courted Iran. One of his family members, I believe his daughter, is married to an Iranian. John Kerry has never seen an enemy of the United States he doesn't like. I've been opposed to John Kerry from the time I first learned about him. He wanted to be president. He emulated Jack Kennedy. He liked the swift boats. Jack Kennedy was on a PT-109. The Japanese destroyer ran over the PT-109. He saved the crew. He could swim. It was a dark night, and they were pretty much all asleep. John Kerry thought he could get a swift boat designation, and he would be the next JFK. He even made his signature look like JFK's. He was a JFK emulator in Boston, and a phony. A part of the radical left that I've always thought really hate America. Okay, now what's the second point I want to make is that why did Israel not know this attack was going on? Well, the left has weakened the Israeli military and weakened their intelligence capabilities. They aren't what they were when I first went to Israel. They've also disarmed the population. The left wants to take guns away. The left in Israel are globalists just like they are in the United States, just like the World Economic Forum. And they've taken guns away. When people don't have guns, you saw them pulling women out of cars by their hair, raping them and killing them. They did horrendous things. And the people couldn't defend themselves because they had no guns. That would not have been the case in 1950 in Israel, I guarantee you. Would not have been the case in the Yom Kippur War 50 years ago. Now you're dealing with a disarmed population that has been brainwashed by this left woke nonsense. Chris, I've said a lot here. Well, let's get into a dialogue for a minute. What are your comments and thoughts and questions?
This leads to the argument here. I don't want to divert anything, but the fact is, an armed and well-ready or prepared population can actually fight back against a terrorist attack like what happened in Hamas. These people were running around like animals indiscriminately, beating, raping, kidnapping, obviously, let's say, traditionally weaker targets. The saying here is a good guy with the gun can stop a bad guy with the gun. That could have happened in Israel. And again, this is a nation where people are not just holding guns willy-nilly without ever having used one before. Most people, I believe young people, again, they have to enlist in the military for a couple of years, so they do have proper training.
Yes, and Israel, when I was there, you would see I haven't been back to Israel for a while. You would see the military in uniform carrying automatic weapons through the cities, and it would be no big deal. The population was armed. And so when a terrorist event started, it was usually put to an end pretty quickly. But when the left gets a hold, the fact is that the United States government is not protecting the American citizens. Our border is wide open. We could easily have a terrorist attack of this nature coming across the border. I'm fully in favor of immigration, and I think it's healthy for a country. I think we're invigorated by getting new people coming into the country, but not if they come in willy-nilly. We don't need the drug cartels. We don't need the terrorists. And by the way, we are the drug cartels. I caught HSBC money laundering. This was 2011. John Cruz came to me. He had accounts from Long Island. He was a branch relationship manager. And these accounts, he was going to see these accounts, and they didn't exist. The bank was taking someone's legitimate Social Security number. They were creating an account. They were running millions of dollars through the account. Then they closed the account. And Department of Homeland Security, after I wrote about this, contacted me. I gave it to the information to the Senate Permanent Investigating Committee. Ultimately, HSBC, that's the money line, they paid $1.9 billion as a fine. No one went to jail. You cannot run a drug cartel unless you can get a bank to launder the money. What are you going to do? You're going to walk around with stacks of $100 bills in a pickup truck or a semi trailer full of $100 bills. got to get it into a bank to make it work. And the banking system is monitored. The Treasury monitors all wire transfers. This was known about by the federal government. The CIA has been in the drug business since the OSS in World War II. We were working with Chiang Kai-shek and his army, and they were drug dealers. Money came from drugs. And the CIA thought it was a nice way to get off the books money to do their dirty ops. And the CIA has never quit. AirCav during Vietnam, there's been a lot of books written on it. And unfortunately, the corruption is massive, and the left fosters the corruption. Now, I want to cut you a comment in a minute, but I want to say one more thing. I remain hopeful because God is still in the act. And I'm going to end this by saying, again, going to 2 Chronicles 7:14. But the point is that I think the American people are finally seeing the corruption of the Biden administration, the corruption of the oligarchs. The governments don't protect us. The governments are our enemy at this point. They're reducing the First Amendment to a thread. They want to destroy the Second Amendment. They've taken God out of the schools. They've told people that we don't know what gender you are. They've massively broken families. Lyndon Johnson with aid to families with dependent children. Pat Moynihan, who was at that time an advisor, ultimately a senator. Now they have all kinds of things in New York named Moynihan. You know, there's a Penn Station. There's a Moynihan station now that they created. The Moynihan said, if you do this, you're going to break up black families. And Lyndon Johnson said, once we do the Voting Rights Act, the blacks will vote for us for a century. Okay, it was all about votes and power, and they were happy to destroy families. They were happy to take God out of the church. They're happy to have abortion. Democratic Party is going to run on abortion, and this is a disgrace. We should not be killing babies in the womb. The left, which is determined to destroy the middle class, to depopulate, these are satanic ideas. Chris, your comments.
I have another question for you. I was watching Jake Sullivan yesterday in a Washington press briefing with good old Karine Jean-Pierre, and he insisted to reporters that that Iran had a role in what's going on. They're not sure of what it is, but they have been, as you know, training Hamas and supporting them financially, militarily, et cetera, for quite a long time. The question is, though, or the questions that were asked by reporters were, what about the $6 billion in ransom? So Sullivan's saying, no, none of that $6 billion has been used or has to fund Hamas. I don't know if I believe that, but this is another issue. We did give this country money, and we knew darn well what they were doing all these years, and and the Biden administration insisted they weren't going to use it for the nuclear program. Never said anything about not funding terrorism with it.
Well, Jake Sullivan, I'd like to call him a fool, but I think he's worse than that. I've been opposed to him for a long time. He's also behind getting NATO to go to the border of Russia. He wants to go to war with, he's a neoliberal, and I like John Kerry, sides with our enemies, and he should not have this position. He was very powerful in the Obama administration. He goes back through saying to Hillary Clinton she could have her foundation and her private email server when she was Secretary of State, and the Clinton Foundation was working with Pinochet, who was a oligarch in Ukraine, shoveling money into the Clinton Foundation like every other criminal oligarch in the world. Clintons were stealing the money. I wrote a book about that called Partners in Crime. And at the same time, Obama gave the green light to Biden to go get money out of Ukraine, out of China, out of every other oligarch he could find around the world who wanted to pay him for favors that they wanted done. And Jake Sullivan, in a position that he's in the State Department, the top policy position, he does not know where the money went. He cannot tell you where the money was going. He can lie. The number one principle, what I would try to tell Trump when he went to Washington, and Trump made enormous mistakes hiring Reince Priebus as his chief of staff. I've been opposed to Reince Priebus for years as a rhino. The whole point is when you go to Washington, the thing that you've got to assume everybody's going to lie to you. So if you're told something by Jake Sullivan, assume he's lying. The only question you've got is why is he lying? What's he trying to accomplish? But you know he's lying. And he'll tell you he's there to serve you. He'll make you feel good. He'll tell you what you want to hear. Then he'll go out of the door and do what he wants to do. He doesn't care about lying. Harry Truman was right. In Washington, if you want to have a friend, buy a dog. You can't trust anybody. Chris?
Jake Sullivan just proves that a neat Brill cream-laden haircut from 1954 only goes so far.
That's a good one. I like that one. Yeah, well, he's gone far enough for me. What's going to happen now? What's going to happen from here? The war is going to expand. And eventually, the United States will stop supplying Israel with weapons because we'll say they have an asymmetrical response. In other words, our White House, our State Department, our CIA, none of whom support Israel, all of whom would be just as happy to see Israel gone. In 1948, when Harry Truman made the decision to partition Israel and partition Palestine and create the state of Israel, several things happened. Allen Dulles and others organized a group of State Department officials to go from Washington to New York and sit in the UN and walk out during that partition in protest of Harry Truman. Our State Department disgraced President Truman while he did that, made that decision and had it enacted. That night, when Palestine had to be partitioned, UN voted to partition it. Remember, this was immediately after World War II, and people remembered the Holocaust. The people were trying to get into Israel who were survivors of the Holocaust. And it was a great awareness of what the Jews had gone through in this genocide, this horrible genocide the Nazis had of the concentration camps, killing women, children, everybody, rounding them up. Families that would have supported Germany had Germany not gone after killing the Jews. At any rate, the whole idea here is that the State Department, the government, Biden, the people supporting Biden, Jake, none of these people truly support Israel. Now, to me, that's going to mean Israel's going to get more and more desperate. And Israel, I wrote another book called Why Israel Can't Wait. I wrote that book in 2009. You can show that cover, Chris, if you can find it. I'm going to make these books again available for sale. I'm going to do that probably next week.
Yeah, I do have. I'll look for the book, but I do have this partition plan from 1947. Right. That's what it would have looked like, or what it was originally intended.
Yeah, and so the Gaza Strip came out of one portion of this, and also the West Bank came out of another portion of it. But the key was Jerusalem, Haifa is the major port, Tel Aviv is the major city. Now, one atomic bomb of Hiroshima magnitude dropped on Tel Aviv or Haifa or Jerusalem would destroy the modern Jewish state as we know it. That's the risk that Israel lives under. And when I wrote Why Israel Can't Wait, and I'm sure it's being discussed, Israel will ultimately contemplate a strike an airstrike or a missile strike on Iran. Because again, why wait? Iran is only going to get stronger. As long as the Democrats, that's the book. And it was about the coming war between Israel and Iran. I've seen this war coming. I've seen this war coming for years. It came on my heart to write Atomic Iran right after I had written Unfit for Command. And at the time, people wouldn't listen. It didn't do very well. I mean, it's all over the place. A lot of copies were printed. They may sell now. I don't know. People might want to read it now. They should, because it's as topical now as when I wrote it. But my point was, I talked with Yalon. I didn't know I was going to meet with them. They called me at the hotel and said, "We're coming to get you, Dr. Corsi. Be ready." And so I didn't know I was going to meet him until I got into the office. Yalon was vice prime minister, and Yalon was a general. And he was number 2 to Netanyahu at that time, 2009. We sat and talked about Ezekiel 37:38 in his office, the government office, talking about the Bible. Ezekiel 37:38 sure sounds like a war, a nuclear war against Iran. I think led by Iran against Israel. So it's an attempt to destroy Israel by nuclear weapons. I think that's what Ezekiel 37:38 is about. And at 37:38 in Ezekiel say God intervenes and Israel is not destroyed. That's the point. Now, I've got to wrap this up because I'm traveling again today, and I said to Yalon, "What are you going to do?" He said, "Dr. Corsi, we will defend Israel, regardless of the consequences. We will defend Israel, and Israel will not be easily defeated, and the whole world may be in a conflagration before that happens. I pray it won't." I'm going to wrap this up now because I do have to get going. It's Dr. Jerome Corsi. This is Wednesday. It's October 11th, 2023. We're in the middle of a horrific war just beginning in the Middle East. In the end, God will win. God will win this war too. And hopefully it'll wake people up to the evil we've been living under, the United States and in Israel. 2 Chronicles 7:14, the solution. God says, get on your knees and atone for having let the world get to this point. Your responsibility in taking God out of the schools, taking God out of our hearts and our families, allowing babies to be cut apart in the womb. These are disgraces and sins against God's law. 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, if we do this, God will hear our prayer and he will heal our land. We need to ask God's intervention at this point. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. I'll be back tomorrow. God bless. Thank you for joining us at thetruthcentral.com. If you like the show, let us know. Like it, pass it around, tell everyone to watch it. We're just beginning. thetruthcentral.com. Thank you for joining us. God bless.